Okay, so next we're going to install our pickups. So you can generally have a look on the back and you might see neck or bridge written. We don't in this instance. We've got FC50 and FC52, and it looks like FC52 is our bridge pickup. As you can see, the pickup ring's got a higher profile. That means our red wire is the bridge pickup. So you might notice I've got the high E and low E loosely installed. So I've just got them loose for now just to get these pickups in place, but just tight enough to not let that tail piece fall out. And the wires obviously go, the corner goes closest to the electronics cavity. Same thing. But you'll see there's a hole just to the side here. So that'll be going through first, which is why we haven't threaded or fully installed our bridge pickup yet. And the neck pickup will probably have to come out again anyway just to install the pickup selector, but I just want to get those holes drilled for the pickup rings first just to make sure we've got them aligned. Okay, so now we'll tighten up our strings. Make sure they're sitting on the saddle correctly. And there's a little bit of play there, so what I'm going to do is just make sure our strings are aligned over the individual pole pieces as well as possible. And mark our holes. And that's really all there is to it. So then you would square off your bridge pickup off your neck pickup and follow the process. Okay, now we've got the hardware installed in our guitar. The next thing we need to do is connect the electronics. Just to explain, if you're not familiar with how guitar electronics actually work, what we've got is a pickup. That pickup generates a signal. And the way it does that, it's essentially a series of magnets surrounded by thousands, I think almost 7,000 individual strands of copper wire. And that creates what's known as an electromagnetic field. Now, when something magnetic is vibrated above that, like a guitar string, for example, it disturbs that field and creates an alternating current. That alternating current runs through these wires where it eventually is connected to the input jack. So we've got one ground wire and one active or hot wire, and they connect to their individual lugs. And when we plug a cable into the input jack to the amplifier, the voltage is converted to sound because both use frequencies. So for instance, different voltages have different frequencies, different pitches have different frequencies as well. Now these other components, the switch, the pickup selector switch, volume pot, tone pot, they don't actually add anything to that signal. They just allow us to manipulate it. So when it comes to a switch, for example, if we switch to the neck position, we're activating the wires that are connected to the lug on the neck position. Alternatively, bridge, we're activating this lug. And in middle position, we're activating a combination of both pickups, as you can see here with that middle lug. Now that will eventually run through our volume potentiometer or pot. The potentiometer is essentially a variable resistor. So inside that pot we have resistive material. And this middle lug, which is the output, is actually connected. It has a wiper that's connected to that resistive material. So if we turn our volume right up, we're directing less of that voltage to ground. If we turn our volume right down, we're directing we're directing everything to ground, then we would have no volume. Now tone pots work, well, they're exactly the same, except we add a capacitor. So as you can see, coming from the output lug, which is the middle lug, and then running to ground, we have a capacitor, which is essentially a filter. So as that voltage runs through there, it will only allow high frequencies to pass through, and those high frequencies then run to ground. So that's essentially what happens when we turn down our tone. We're not actually adding anything, we're just removing those higher frequencies. Okay, so when it comes to soldering, you're going to need a few things, obviously. We're going to need a soldering iron. Now, if you're just wiring up one guitar, a cheap soldering iron will probably do the job. If you plan on working on more than one guitar, for example, I'd probably get something with at least some more temperature control and a good solid base. You're also going to need solder, obviously. Now, your guitar kit will come with more than enough solder to complete the job. And the last thing I'd recommend keeping on hand is just a damp sponge. And we use that just to keep the tip of our soldering iron clean. And when we're soldering, it's important that we tin the soldering iron and we tin the components. And what that really means is we're just giving a light coating of solder to the iron and to the different components, and that will help with connections. It will also help the tip of our soldering iron from becoming oxidized, which means when the tip becomes oxidized, it's difficult for solder to stick to it. It tends to ball up and become more difficult to work with. Now, the other thing with soldering, if you haven't done any soldering before, it's not the same as gluing something together. We're really transferring heat. So we have solder on our very hot iron. Then we need to transfer that heat through the wire to the actual lug we're connecting it to. And once that lug's hot enough, the solder will take to that connection. Essentially, the soldering iron's hot and these elements are cold. The solder doesn't want to leave the iron. So just keep that in mind. You need to warm up your lugs for a couple of seconds first. Okay, so before we get into actually turning on the soldering iron, the first thing we need to do is run our pickup selector wires from our pickup selector cavity into our control panel cavity, which is just through here. When you're wiring up an EXP style guitar, you need to do things in a certain order, and that's because we can't run these pickup selector wires through these cavities when the pickups are in place. So we need to get these in place first. So what I normally do, just mask off the end so they're easier to push through. And I generally come from the neck pickup cavity rather than coming from the pickup selector cavity. Much more difficult to thread from the other direction. And as mentioned, I've selected these colors. Black is usually used as a ground. Green is going to be my output from the pickup selector. And then I've got white and red. I've got a red wire coming from my neck pickup, which will coordinate with this red wire coming from the neck position pickup selector. You can see this is red also, but I'm just going to reference the hot wire inside. So the active wire in this case has white shielding for the bridge. The active wire on the neck pickup has red. So that's why I'm using white and red here, just to coordinate those colors, because once the pickups are installed, it's going to be difficult to know which wires are which. Okay, so I'm just threading those through. Once I've got those in place, I'm just going to mask those off as well so they don't come back through. And you can see too, these wires are long, and they need to be long because the Explorer body is quite long itself. The next thing I'd recommend from here is taking those 4 wires and combining them with the neck pickup wires, masking those off as well, just like so, just to make it easier to poke them through the hole. Now there'll be a hole just to the side of your neck pickup cavity. Just push those wires through like so. And just make sure you've got that wire facing the right way. So the higher side of the pickup ring will be facing towards the back. Now from here, we're going to pick up our bridge pickup. So you can see the bridge pickup sits here, the wire's closest to the hole in the bridge pickup cavity. I'm also going to try and tape this up. I'm not sure if the hole is going to be big enough to allow. See what we can get away with here. Okay, so now I've got all those wires connected. I'm just going to push them through that hole there. I'm just quickly going to install that neck pickup as well, just so we can turn the guitar over without having to hold 2 pickups as we do it. Okay, from here, just holding this pickup, I'm just going to tip the guitar over. And you can just see the edge of that wire tipping through there, so I'm wondering if I can grab that with the needle nose pliers. Okay, so now we've got our wires through. I'm just going to mask those together now, just so we don't lose track of which is which. So these are the wires coming from our pickup selector. This is our bridge pickup. These 2 are our neck. And last we have our ground, and that's the ground we installed earlier against our bridge, against the bushing for the bridge post. Next thing, I would start warming up my soldering iron. One of the first things we'll do is connect our pickup selector. So I'm just turning the guitar over again, and I'll install that pickup while I'm waiting for the soldering iron to heat up. Okay, so next, just taking the pick guard. You want to install the pickup selector like so. So the side facing up will be the chamfered holes. Just push that through like so. Put the washer in place and the nut over the top. And it also suggests just putting down some sort of protection for the guitar. So as I said, we just want a thin coating of solder. We're really just looking for a thin coating of solder on the iron like so. Now I'd also tin these lugs. So what you want to do there is just hold the iron on the lug for a couple of seconds. And just put a very small amount of solder on there. Remember, you need to heat that lug up for a second first. You don't need to use a lot. Okay, so the first connection I'll make will be the ground wire. So again, just heating that lug up. So I might do the output wire first. It's probably going to be a little easier to access. So the green wire is our output. That's going to the middle lug. And it needs to thread through 2 lugs that are actually connected. That one cool as well. Our last wire is our bridge pickup.